They're finicky, especially near the borders. Where Bedford was located, Weddle Brothers was a general contractor there out of Bloomington. They are 181 or something, I think was the number, was the operators union. And so the Weddle usually works with, so Bedford was technically in 181's territory, but Weddle Brothers usually works with a different union, or local, I guess is what you call them. So they had an operator they liked using, but the Louisville union, I think, is really based out of wanted one of their own, operators on there. So they had to work deals out and work with dues, and that actually got one of our operators that they liked working with kicked off the project because there's a difficulty working between unions and they couldn't agree on everything. It's also interesting seeing some of the union reps come out and get in spats with foremen. There's a lot of yelling involved there, which I was not expecting, but that was certainly interesting. I was told they wouldn't let you do a whole lot of work, but they were more than willing to let me jump in there with a shovel. I didn't because it wasn't my role, but they were more than happy to hand me something and say go to work. So.
Nothing else? All right, you got off easy today.
All right, I'm Ted Seinel. I'm from BMWC. I had 2 years with them already. I'll go my third year next summer, and I'll be out in Portland. First summer, I was in Wheatfield, Indiana. If anyone knows where that was, I'd be really impressed. It is in the middle of nowhere, about 45 minutes north of here. There's probably about like 3 restaurants within a 20-mile radius, so lunch was always really interesting. One big thing though there is Schaefer Station. It's a coal-burning power plant in Wheatfield. It's for NIPSCO, which is the Northern Indiana Public Service Company. Basically, they provide all the utilities for Northern Indiana, Northwest Indiana. Basically, my job was I worked on a dust collector project. And that dust collector project is kind of confusing if you don't know about like coal burning power plants. So I'm gonna give you kind of an overview of how those work because it's quite convoluted. And the first time I was in there, I was very taken back by the whole process. So basically the coal comes in on this huge conveyor, comes up this conveyor, and then is dumped onto another conveyor and then feeds these silos that eventually feed a pulverizer, which the pulverizer basically takes the coal, grinds it down to a sand-like substance, and then it's shot into the boiler at the bottom. It ignites, heats up, and then there's these huge pendants called, they're 10-minute pendants, but they're like boiler tubing is what you would probably call them. They're like about this far apart and about probably this size in radius. So basically what happened is they go all the way up this boiler, they heat up, and because it's under so much pressure, it goes in, it's under this immense pressure from the heat, but it's boiling, but then once that pressure is released and it goes outside the tube, it like flashes the steam like right away, and then that goes into the turbine, turns the turbine, which turns the generator. So basically the dust collector is part of the front end of this, okay? So the coal's coming in, it goes onto that second conveyor in the tripper room, okay? And when it goes onto that conveyor, it creates a lot of dust, and that's where the dust collector comes in. And the dust collector they had on there was about 40 years old and not up to EPA standards. And I don't think I have a picture of the tripper room, just because of safety stuff. They're not allowed to let me take a ton of pictures in there. But I think Brandon can attest, he was there. There's coal everywhere in that place. It's like, you see your footprints all over the place. So it needed to be replaced, and it was quite dirty. So basically that's what the job was, like, to basically install the old system, and then while we were doing that, we had to demo the old system. And that was one of the big parts of that project, was because of where everything was set up. The new dust collector was actually running through some of the old dust collector, but we couldn't take the old system out of commission, so therefore we had to make some adjustments, a lot of RFIs. That was one of my big jobs on the project. So my first couple of days I was doing like POs, I was just trying to get to know what the project looked like. I was looking at drawings, stuff like that. But then about like a month in, I was basically set on like, okay, you're gonna learn how to write an RFI, and I ended up writing like about 80 of them throughout the whole summer. And if anyone's written an RFI before, they are no fun to write, especially when you need to be very exact and detailed about something you're not totally familiar with. And that was like great experience for me, because I had no experience doing any of that kind of stuff, and it really helped me learn about the process of like why we write RFIs and then what the project was trying to accomplish. Big thing about this project was a helicopter lift. So this new dust collector system was actually put outside on the tripper roof. And I have a picture of it coming up here, but basically we had to set a bunch of structural steel beams up there using a helicopter, because the crane, one, we could not get it close enough, and two, was much more expensive and would take a lot more time than using just a helicopter to just take these pieces and set them on top of the roof, right in place where they can go. It was a great learning experience with that, because with the process of having a helicopter lift, the safety is huge. So basically when this helicopter is flying over, you can't have people, depending on the size of the helicopter, you can't have people within like 500 feet of where it's flying, or as we would term, unnecessary personnel, because there had to be some people within that area, obviously. But before the helicopter lift, me, the safety guy, and another an owner's rep from NIPSCO, we had to walk the unit down, and we had to figure out what areas we had to block off, basically with red tape. And there is like hundreds and hundreds of ways you can get to one area, so we had to make sure that we blocked off an area from the one unit going to the other, because there was two units right next to each other, and they're 10 stories tall. So we had to block off about 3 stories at the top, and doing that was not like a simple task, and it took quite a few number of days. And my job the day of the lift was to run around and make sure that all the red tape was in place during that time. And the execution of it was crazy also. So basically every single lift had to be sequenced, because we wanted to make sure that we weren't taking something up too early or too late. We wanted to make sure that we took this huge steel beam and we put it right in place, and not just like set it on the ground, because once we set it on the ground, we ain't moving it again. It needed to make sure it was bolted up in place, and make sure it was could stay in place, and then we could move another one. Also with that, with that execution, I had to go through every single lift and basically sequence the lift. I was given the sequence, but I had to make sure that the weight, every single one, was not too heavy based on the type of helicopter we were using. And that was really interesting because of the grading that we were using. They came in like basically these bundles, and I basically had to figure out each piece of grading, how big it was, and then using like a multiplier based on like the type of grading, I had to figure out how much each weight of each piece was. That took about like a couple weeks, just because of the amount of pieces of grading. But yeah, that's what the helicopter was. I got a few videos of that. It was a great learning experience, just about old progress. Actually, no. Great learning experience. I was taking progress, like on a lot of ductwork had to go up, and seeing how like basically how maybe the really crazy thing actually about this project was that like you'd have to take the piece of ductwork, you had to put it up there, you had to kind of fit it. Then you had to tack it, bring it back down, and weld it somewhere else, because in the tripper room, you can't be welding around a bunch of dust, like a bunch of coal dust, because that could ignite right away, and just a huge safety hazard, obviously. So taking progress was always kind of interesting, because they were always like kind of putting stuff up and taking it down, and a bunch of other stuff. And then importance of tracking documents, especially with RFIs, POs, all that good stuff I had to really do throughout the project. That is the overview of like our laydown area. So as you can see, there. So these are the silos that we had to set up there. Now you had to use a different helicopter than what we used to set all the structural steel. And these cyclones here, and I forgot what those things were called, but that was like the control room right there. So basically we had to use we had actually 3 different helicopter lifts and using 2 different helicopters for the whole thing. And this is the tripper roof, so this is where the helicopter came in and set down those pieces. This is like we had to put holes in the roof to make sure that we had to tie in to the tripper room, which is right below, so we could connect the ductwork upwards, so the dust could be cycled through. And this is a video of it just taking off. This is the helicopter they were using. Oh wow, that's really good right there. That is awesome. I don't know how that did not happen on my computer, but that's one of them, and it's probably going to happen for the other ones also. I hope. Yep, there it goes again. So if you kind of turn your head, don't break your neck or anything like that. But basically, that's what's going on. They basically I'd say like 2 lifts in advance, you have all the rigging that would be on it, and then the helicopter would come down, the choker would come down, you'd be able to latch it on there. The guys would move away and go right up. We did 200 lifts in 8 hours, which was pretty phenomenal considering the exactness and like the amount of room between that roof. Like there wasn't a whole lot of space for air, and we had no accidents whatsoever. It was very impressive. And this is just me on the roof with some other great camera footage, and of course it goes sideways. This one was an interesting piece because it had to be put into the existing building, like kind of pushed in there, and it got the way they were pushing it in there, it got wedged, and 2 minutes later they eventually got it in. But it was kind of an interesting thing trying to see like the helicopter weight there and kind of keeping it in place. And while all these guys are trying to make sure that it gets bolted up into place, and we're trying to be efficient because we know if we don't get it done today, what's not going to be done tomorrow. So it was kind of like a race against time to a certain extent. Am I great camera footage? That is like an end product. That's like a couple weeks before I left, so we had set all that down. We had all that scaffolding up there. BMWC self-performed the Boilermaker, pipe fitter, and ironworker job, parts of the job, and then we subcontracted the scaffolding. And the electrician part was not in our bid, but another contractor was out there. And then, this is the tripper room. So this is where that pole would come in on both sides. One is for one unit, one is for the other. And then that new ductwork up here, that's the new stuff. And then if you kind of look all the way down there, it goes side by side, that is the old ductwork. And basically the dust gets cycled back through and it gets put back into those silos. So it's basically just like making sure the dust doesn't go in the air and actually goes back into the system, if that makes sense. So I'll be quick about this. I was totally different. Instead of being in the field, I was in the corporate office. I worked in QA/QC, quality assurance, quality control. I worked with the director of quality, worked on welding procedures and welding performance qualification requirements. It's a bunch of acronyms. It took a while for me to learn all that, but basically what I had to do is I had to take every single welding procedure and make sure we had all the information from it. I don't have a welding procedure, but this is the Excel document I look at all summer. There's about like 1,000 rows of this thing. So basically every time that I'd find the welding procedure, I'd go across, make sure we had all this information, and then keep going and make sure I saved it in the right spot. Because basically eventually what I made was a search function using all this information on SharePoint. Pretty cool project. It was real tough for me because I did not get to interact with people as much as I did the first time, and that just drove me nuts because I get energy from talking to people, and if I'm sitting there and just looking at a blank screen the whole time, well, not a blank screen, but a screen like this the whole time, I'm not gonna be as productive. What else do I got here? Big thing I learned from that is the importance of standardization, because what happened was somebody had created this worksheet, but it didn't have a bunch of empty cells. So I had to basically come in and fill those empty cells, but the information that might have been put in for the same, okay, so we say we have this filler metal, and then the filler metal is used again for this welding procedure. Some guy put it in differently up here than he did in here. So in order to make a search function, you gotta be able to have the same information. Otherwise, someone's gonna be going in there and getting different results for what they put in, and they're just trying to get this one thing. I won't get into welding procedures because that will take hours, and I'm not gonna waste your time. And then also the biggest thing was checking over my work, because the amount of times I had to redo stuff, if I kept messing that up, basically I'd mess that up like a couple hundred times. So basically I'd go back once in a while, take another welding procedure, make sure I put that information in correctly, and then I kind of, if I did something wrong, I kind of look back, kind of like overview of my stuff and be like, okay, doubtful I did anything wrong there, but maybe I should look at these to make sure that we did this all right. And one of the cool experiences I had was I actually got to weld also. I got to TIG and MIG weld. MIG welding, I don't know about you welders out there, but I had MIG welding is like a string, it feeds in through a wire, and it's really quick, and you kind of change like how fast it comes out and stuff like that. But that was a really cool experience just because I'd never been able to do something like that. And it's really, like when you do something like that, you get a real appreciation for those guys that are able to weld so efficiently and so effectively. Because QA, QC for that kind of stuff is like, this goes out like, it's crazy, especially when you're looking at boiler tubes and stuff like that. You can't have any type of imperfections because hot water is running through. And that's it. You guys have any questions? No? All right. One?
So about the helicopter thing,
Yeah.
how did you decide to do it with, like, I know that the crane thing wasn't an option, but who picked a helicopter? And is that like the normal kind of?
Oh yeah, these guys like are booked up. Like these helicopter guys, like they literally just do lifts. Like they just usually they pick up. Like NASA uses them to move like rockets from one place to another because it takes too long to move those things across the ground. So I'll kind of go touch on the crane part, because basically the way it works is like you got the unit here, okay, and you got a bunch of like transformers over here, and this is like where our laydown area was over here, and we had to put it on this roof. So if we wanted to, we could have put a crane like right here, but then we have worries about like messing with like something falling on the transformer over here. Then you got a bunch of like office buildings over here, and a bunch of other stuff like this on this side too. So there was really like, with the helicopter it was really easy because like you didn't have to evacuate a bunch of area. But with the crane, with its length and then like where you're going to be moving the lift, it would have been like a terrible hassle for everybody at the plant, because you'd have to like move people out of offices, and this project took the whole year. So it was really like, that was the best option for them. And it's more inexpensive than you would think. It's not a huge price, but it's still got a significant price tag on it.
Magnitude, cost?
I want to say it's like hundreds of thousands. It's not like millions or anything like that. So it's like based on, well, I don't know how you run a crane. It was going to be a tower crane if we had to use it, and it would have been the amount of days we'd have had it out there to make all those picks that we made in 3 days essentially. Like the crane would have taken like twice, like not even twice the time, hundreds of magnitude of time. So I wasn't in the planning process of that, but that's what I basically understood from choosing the helicopter, because I was surprised by the whole thing too. So, any other questions? No?
Thank you very much.
What? No. They didn't actually let anybody at this point, but it's like, it's so loud. There's like, Tyler, you couldn't see in the picture, like the pictures of the one sideways, but it was like, the thing would move around all the time. They spit out like water and things.
You ever have any near
A guy like fell off, so like we had to elevated surface. You keep going then.
I'm listening.
Well, so like we set the structural steel, And then we had to move around because we didn't have all the grades out there either. And when we set those huge like cyclones and silos, we had to have guys out there. And they were tied off, but like it was hard to move around with that many guys and stuff like that. And one guy like fell on his back or something, but it was like that was the only thing. Yeah, he got right back up. That was the only thing.
So I'm Brock. I'm gonna preface this, but I took a lot of pictures, a lot of selfies, lots of stuff. I'm trying to make this fun. You can laugh, you can not laugh. I don't really care. But I also like a lot of slides and pictures. And at the end, I got a bunch of random like small stories that I think are funny. Maybe they might not be. I don't know. But these are all off my Instagram, so if you follow me, you've seen ones before. But I spent my summer in South Bend with ESCO, who is a subcontractor that focuses on systems like the AV stuff, healthcare, fire alarm, and security. I worked with the security as well as the AV stuff. So my summer goals were basically to build my construction knowledge, as this was my first internship. I don't really have any like background in it. I wanted to be an asset and make a tangible difference. And lastly, it was my first time like all by myself, so I learned how to like cook and do all that adult stuff like paying bills. That was fun. I missed my rent the first month because I didn't know I had to pay it on the first. It was great. And then, yeah, I thought it was like the fifth of when you moved in. It's not. And then professionally, I wanted to start to build my network and be part of a design team at some point. So ESCO is based in Indianapolis. They've been around for about 55 years. They have offices in Indianapolis, Fort Wayne, Richmond, and then my South Bend office. I've been to the Indianapolis, Richmond, and Fort Wayne ones for interviews or other things. I'll get to the other things in the future. They've also done the Colts Stadium as well as a bunch of stuff in South Bend and like hospitals. I don't know much about like where they are, but I assume big hospital. They kind of all do the same thing. So my project was basically the football stadium. They added in, so they built that building, and the far one. They tore down the existing press box and built it back up. And then they also added all the landscaping, and they built a video board that's on the backside of this building. And then they renovated the concourses, the bowls, and they added a bunch of seats and stuff, and then they made them all 1.5 inches wider than they were, which was expensive. I don't know. I didn't listen to the guys that did that part, but they basically took out all the old seats to put in a seat that was 1 inch wider. So that was fun. Barton Mallow was our GC. They had the whole project, and then we did the whole audio, the security, and all the inside AV stuff. My weekly routine was interesting. I worked about 60 to 100 hours a week, depending on when it was in the project. So I worked with my project manager. His name is Dan. He's on the left. That was my last day. The lighting was great in his office. He's not a big picture guy. So I worked with him, and then I also worked with a couple of the engineers. They were different individuals. They were quiet and very, they were there, and then like they weren't, but I learned a lot. And then with the overtime, that was the fun part. They tossed me out there in the field with the technicians. And basically, I did what they were doing. I learned what they were doing. I did a lot of it. We went to Lowe's a lot to get stuff like ladders, some ice cream a lot. That's the other intern. He's in BCM here. He's a cool guy. And that's Joe and John. They were stuck with me for like 30 hours a week, so we became friends. Let's see, next. So with the bowl audio, this was my first couple weeks out there. I was there when they hung the line arrays. which are on the sides of the screen behind skims because apparently they're not pretty. I like how they look, no one else did. So I was there when they hung those. I was also there when we had to go back up there and realign half of them because they didn't put them up there right. So I got to tie off like John is and kind of hang off the side and do stuff. I conquered my fear of heights this summer. That's the control booth. I actually got to build the monitor mount thing. I learned how to not like weld, but like put metal together without like actually welding it. I don't know what it's called, but we custom fabbed that thing. And I actually got to turn that on the first time, and I got the sticker out of the box, so that was cool. And then with the main Bull Audio, there are also about 3,000 speakers in the concourses and on the underside of the buildings for the full sound field. They put those up in the winter, so I didn't see that part of it. But this was the East-West ballrooms. They had these in both buildings. This was made when I spent a whole weekend putting the lighting bays in because our electrical sub was behind, and then they took a weekend off, and they were due on Monday. So we spent 2 16-hour days putting in the lighting bays on both sides. And they were also testing the heat at this point in time. And if you see the lighting bays are there, the heat ducts are in line with each one. So I was up there and they were shooting heat down. It was really bad. But that was the ballroom, and that was pretty fun. I did that for about a week. Learned how to drive a lift. Pretty sure I wasn't actually allowed to drive the lift or be up on it, but I was harnessed off and everything, so it was okay. This was the restaurant area, and in here they had a full automation with the 38 screens. I got to program a matrix that controlled it all. They since redid that because I did it wrong, but that's not. I learned a lot off of it. I also learned how to mount a TV really, really well, because when Notre Dame picked out the models, they have 780 of these same NEC monitors, not TVs. So when they got there and they hung about half of them, they decided that they hated the bezel on it. So we had to take them all down, ship them back, and put the new ones up. So that was a weekend where ESCO called in all of their technicians from all the offices, and we had about 85 of them there on overtime and double overtime. And I was a team leader because I knew where everything was. So I was leading around guys that had been working in the industry for like 35 years, which was a learning experience because like they don't mess around. Like they walk in with their tools, screen up, screen down, put it in a box, move on, test it. And I was just like, anybody need to know where the bathroom is or like where the food is? So that was one of the restaurants. The bar in there was super cool. This was my favorite part of it. I got to work in the home locker room a lot. This was the last 3 weeks of my internship. In the home locker room, they had 44 screens, a bunch of 80s on the wall across the outside. Then each locker had kind of their own like individual thing, and then like the end caps, and that was super cool to be a part of. And then my last week there, they were behind a lot, which was kind of the mantra of the entire thing. So they gave me these prints, and I had to figure out where everything like was and all that, and wire it all up. And then they let me wire and rack all 3 of these. So I had to run the stuff from the tray down, service loop it, plug it all in, terminate it, and all that stuff. And I was behind those racks for about 4 days. That's a back shot of each of them. That was cool because I was like doing something that would be there for a while, and so far they haven't switched any of it out, and they would have told me if I messed it up because they like doing that. But so that was that. And then we'll get there. And then so that was all my like field stuff.